can't believe this is the final edition of Harvey's Hot Takes with Bryan Hayes before my summer vacation. Bryan, are you gonna miss me over the next few weeks?
I am, Jay. I love doing this, man, and I'm going to come out firing post-Labor Day. Like, I am going to have takes for you that have been stored for weeks. So enjoy your break, but come back ready because I'm coming back hotter than ever. I'm putting my stake in the ground right now. It's go time when you guys return.
I cannot wait. It's going to be great. But this one's going to be great, too, because we just heard from Connor McDavid at the Zach Hyman Golf Tournament, Bryan. And Connor McDavid loves the offseason moves that Jeff Jackson has orchestrated for Edmonton. Of the 7 Canadian teams, do you think Jeff Jackson has put together the best offseason so far?
Yes, I do. I think them just bringing the band back would have been good enough, but he went above and beyond that, right? You obviously bring in Jeff Skinner, who's a low-cost, really could pay off move for a guy that really doesn't have playoff history, but he's chosen to be there because he's a believer in the program that you're putting together. Them getting Adam Henrique to come back on the cheap, Connor Brown on the cheap. And Draisaitl's here. I think that might be the best part of this whole offseason is that Draisaitl's agent is coming out saying, we want to talk. Let's see what's going on here. And, we'll see how that all plays out. But we know Draisaitl's going to return. We know McDavid's returning. Hyman's returning. All the best players are going to be here. But they're bringing back guys that they acquired at the trade deadline that I wasn't sure they were going to be able to do. They found the money for that. On top of the fact that obviously they had an incredible second half into the Stanley Cup playoffs, I think most people throughout the country and throughout the hockey world were prepared to say, regardless of what happened, during the offseason, Edmonton was going to have the best chance of winning for the 7 Canadian teams. And I think they've actually, again, improved on that. And Jeff Jackson's got an interesting decision to make here because he wants to bring in a GM. With Ken Holland leaving, he wants to bring in a GM, but because he's done such a good job, including a sneaky trade with Buffalo, bringing in, a young prospect that I think could play there this upcoming season, if not certainly post-trade deadline, I think people in Edmonton want Jackson to keep the job.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what do you need someone else in there working deals for? Obviously, he is good at this. Obviously, he knows what he's dealing with. He made a great hiring in Chris Knoblauch in conjunction with Ken Holland. Obviously, Knoblauch's not going to have a full summer, a full training camp into next year. I think if you're in Edmonton, you're ecstatic. I think McDavid's ecstatic. I think Draisaitl will be happy. And they're gearing up. They're going to be favorites to go do it again. And I can't wait to see how that plays out.
Now there's the other side of the coin. Which team do you believe, of the 7 Canadian teams, of course, which of them do you believe has had the worst offseason, Bryan Hayes?
Well, I'm going to give you a couple, but I'm going to start up the road in Edmonton because if you're going to pump the tires of the Oilers, you know that the Flames fans are going to hate that. And I think it's been a really difficult ride if you're a Calgary Flames fan for a while here because the Oilers have been so good. They've been so much better than the Flames. The Battle of Alberta is always going to exist based on its history, based on the geography, based on the rivalry, but it's so lopsided right now. It's not even close. The Oilers are the best team in the country. They might be the best team in the league. They just got better, I think, over the offseason, and they went to Game 7 of the Cup final. So if you're a Flames fan, that in and of itself is difficult to handle. And on top of it, they put up the white flag. They're not totally openly announcing it, Craig Conroy and company in the front office, that they're blowing this thing up. Look at their roster. They're blowing it up. Markstrom got dealt. They're going to have 2 younger goaltenders now. On top of it, I think a lot of people in Calgary wanted TJ Ginla to drop to them in the draft, and he didn't get there, right? If if Jerome's kid was available and got drafted, this could be all blown over, and you could say, this is great. We have the next wave of Ginlas within the organization. That didn't even happen. So they're not a good team. I think they're going to get worse, and the Oilers are great. So that stings in Calgary. I'd also go to Winnipeg. They just lost too many pieces. Monahan left, Toffoli left, others. They had to buy out Nate Schmidt. They haven't replaced those pieces yet. Also, you're changing the coach. Scott Arniel comes in. He's not a high-profile coach. I'm curious to see what he brings to the table, but I don't think he's going to be ticket selling. I don't think he's a guy in Winnipeg that they're necessarily convinced will get the job done there. I like what they have. They're a good team. They're a playoff team basically annually, but I think they're going to be in the same spot that they were last year at the trade deadline, where they're going to have to go out and try to really hit grand slams and really put it together towards the end of the year, which is something they have not been able to do the last couple of years. They've made it to the playoffs, and they've got bounced quickly. They're in a tough division, a tough conference. So I would look at Winnipeg and say they've probably had a really tough, in fact, I know they've had a really tough offseason, and the Flames for sure, based on what's going on with them and their program and what's going up the road in Edmonton. I mean, it's a double whammy in Calgary right now.
Okay, we've talked about a bunch of Canadian teams, but you are a Toronto radio host, so I got to ask you one Leaf question, and I always have to ask you about Mitchell Marner. This is my last chance to ask you about Mitchell until September when we return and you come out firing. Are you of the opinion, Bryan Hayes, that Mitchell Marner will be a part of the Toronto Maple Leafs organization next season?
Yes, I am. I've said this countless times on your show, on my show. I think if anything was going to happen with Marner here, it was going to happen before July 1st. It was going to happen the week of the draft. That's when the heavy lifting happens in the NHL. You have to know what kind of money you're dealing with, what kind of assets you have, what kind of money and assets other teams have, other prospective teams have. This would be a juggernaut trade if it was going to happen. And you can't just run that in August, pick up the phone and say, hey, where are you here with the cap? You know, what are you dealing with in terms of assets? It just doesn't work that way in the NHL. I interviewed Barry Trotz. He was on Overdrive last week, and I asked him, I'm like, any big moves you're hearing about in the NHL? You think everything's basically done? And he said, yes. You know, everything kind of happens leading up to July 1st. After that, there'll be, some signings, a couple of minor trades. There'll be PTOs handed out to veteran guys who will come to camp and try to make teams. And, is there a 1 or 2% chance something crazy happens? I guess, but I don't think so, Jay. I think it's very quiet. I think that's intentional. Marner's camp is being very quiet. The Maple Leafs are very quiet. I don't think you hear from anyone involved until day one of camp. And maybe a contract extension, but I'm doubtful on that as well. I think they're likely just going to play this out. I think he's going to show up for his final year. He's going to play it out. We'll see what the team decides to do, what the player decides to do. But if anything was going to give here with Mitch Marner, we would have certainly known by now. At a minimum, with all of the insiders in the game, including the great insiders we have at TSN, something would have come out in Vegas at the draft that the Leafs are talking to Team X, right?
Yeah.
Or Marner has asked for a trade to Team Y. That would have been out by now. It hasn't happened. It's quiet on purpose. Mitch Marner is going to be a Leaf next year, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. I can't wait till they get to camp to see what he has to say about it, how he handles it. He's a great player. They've got a very good team. They're a great regular season team. He and his teammates have to prove they can be a great playoff team. If that happens, obviously everything can change. And I think Marner and the Leafs are counting on that. Fans can be fickle. Media can be fickle. The beauty of sports is you can always rewrite whatever your story is, whatever your reputation is. If he has a great year and they win it all, Mitch Marner will be a king. He knows that. And he can determine if he wants to stay, if he wants to go. But it's probably going to be a dance between the two parties. But that dance is going to take place while he's playing for the Maple Leafs next year.
Bryan, man, this is great. Really have enjoyed having you on the show this year. Love this segment. I hope the golf game goes really well for you this summer. I know you're going to be swinging the sticks. All the drives are going to be straight down the middle. And we'll see you in September with all those hot takes again. Have a great summer, okay, buddy?
You too, Jay. You and your staff, you guys are the best. I appreciate you having me on. I love doing it every week, and I can't wait until the fall. We'll see you then.
Sounds good.
Hot Takes is presented by Harvey's. Customize your burger and get it delivered from our app to your door. Harvey's, it's a beautiful thing.